Just when Port Charles believed it had witnessed the conclusion of a shocking trial, the ABC soap opera General Hospital has plunged its audience into a far darker narrative. Willow Tate, who only recently walked free after being acquitted of shooting her husband Drew Cain, has now committed an act so calculated and sinister that it has fundamentally altered the landscape of the show's most compelling storylines. The nurse who claimed victimhood in the courtroom has revealed herself to be something far more dangerous, a woman willing to cross every moral boundary to maintain control over those around her. This transformation marks a pivotal moment in the soap's narrative, forcing beloved characters to confront uncomfortable truths about loyalty, morality, and the limits of forgiveness. The acquittal itself seemed designed to provide redemption and closure. Despite Alexis Davis's deliberate attempts to sabotage her own closing arguments, the jury rendered a verdict of not guilty, leaving many in Port Charles to believe that justice, or at least a conclusion, had been served. However, what appeared to be the end of one dark chapter merely served as a prologue to an even more disturbing one. Willow's response to her newfound freedom was not one of gratitude or reflection, but rather of calculation and determination. The acquittal, it would seem, had given her something far more dangerous than vindication. It had given her confidence. The poisoning, calculated cruelty. Within days of walking free from the courthouse, Willow made her move. Drawing upon her extensive knowledge as a trained nurse, she approached Drew with what appeared to be tenderness and concerned the role of a devoted wife. Yet beneath this carefully constructed facade lay something altogether different. With steady hands and calculated precision, Willow injected Drew with an unknown substance, introducing poison directly into his bloodstream. The steadiness of her movements revealed far more about her state of mind than any confession could have articulated. This was not a moment of desperation or panic. This was deliberate. This was strategy. What Willow had not anticipated, however, was that she was not alone. Willow believed her crime would remain undetected, a secret she could carry and control as she had controlled so much else in recent months. Her confidence in her ability to maintain this deception reflected a profound underestimation of her surroundings, and more critically, an underestimation of the young man who witnessed the entire act, Wiley, the very child she claims to love above all else. The injection caused Drew to collapse almost immediately, his consciousness slipping away as his body betrayed him. Medical examination would later reveal that Drew had suffered a massive stroke, one severe enough to leave him with locked-in syndrome, a condition so devastating that it traps the mind of a conscious person within a body, incapable of movement or speech. Drew, it appeared, was now a prisoner in his own body, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to defend himself or expose the woman who had done this to him. For many viewers, the question became, had Willow's calculated gambit finally worked? Had she successfully eliminated the one person who posed a genuine threat to her custody of Wiley and Amelia? The witness, Wiley's burden. The answer, however, lay with someone far too young to carry such a burden of knowledge. Wiley Corinthos, the small child at the center of so much of this saga, had witnessed his mother's act. In that moment, the child bore witness to a truth that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of everyone involved in this darkening storyline. What Wiley saw, he could not unsee. What Wiley knew, he could not unknow. And, significantly, what Wiley knew would not remain his secret for long. The realization that Wiley possessed this dangerous knowledge created a new dynamic to the story. Wiley, young as he is, would eventually communicate what he had witnessed. This is not merely about a child repeating words or actions. It is about the implications of a child's testimony. In Port Charles, a show where secrets rarely remain hidden for long, the chance that Wiley would somehow convey what he saw represented a genuine threat to Willow's carefully constructed narrative. Chase's impossible choice. Enter Detective Harrison Chase, the man who has made no secret of his enduring feelings for Willow. Chase's loyalty to Willow has been the subject of considerable scrutiny throughout the unfolding crisis. He allowed his actions on behalf of Willow during the trial to result in his own suspension from the Port Charles Police Department. His commitment to defending her innocence, even when that innocence was questionable, resulted in the loss of his professional standing. Chase has in essence sacrificed his career on the altar of his belief in Willow, or perhaps more accurately, on the altar of his feelings for her. When Wiley communicates to Chase what he witnessed, the injection, the calculated act, the the poisoning of Drew Chase faces an excruciating moral crossroads. On one side stands Willow, the woman for whom he has already sacrificed so much, the woman he clearly loves despite her growing darkness. On the other side stands truth, justice, and the fundamental principles that led him to become a police officer in the first place. Chase must confront a reality that many refuse to acknowledge, that sometimes the people we love are capable of terrible things. What makes Chase's position particularly tragic is that he understands something that many others have failed to grasp about Willow's actions. She is not a woman driven by desperation or fear, not anymore. Whatever desperation she felt when she shot Drew initially has transformed into something far more sinister. Her subsequent poisoning of him represents not an act of self-defense, but an act of calculated elimination. A deliberate attempt to remove a problem rather than solve it. Chase, despite his deep personal feelings for Willow, recognizes this distinction, and he cannot allow it to remain hidden. The weight of truth. Chase's decision to reveal what he has learned represents a profound rejection of the path of complicity. Despite his undeniable emotional attachment to Willow, despite the genuine love he feels for her, Chase has made the choice that defines his character. He will not cover for Willow. He will not become her accomplice. He will not allow his feelings to compromise his integrity. This represents a significant moment of maturity and moral clarity for Chase. A recognition that true love sometimes requires doing the thing that will cause the most pain. In choosing to expose Willow's crime, Chase is not rejecting her as a person. Rather, he is rejecting the path she has chosen, the darkness she has embraced, and the person she has become. He is making a statement about the limits of loyalty and the boundaries of acceptable behavior, even within the context of deep emotional attachment. For Chase, protecting Willow from justice would mean failing to protect her from herself. Failing to interrupt the trajectory that has turned her from a woman acting in fear into a woman capable of cold, calculated violence. Willow's final reckoning. The revelation that Wiley witnessed her crime, combined with Chase's decision to report this evidence to the authorities, sets in motion a chain of events that Willow can no longer control. The woman who believed herself clever enough to orchestrate a poisoning without detection, who thought her knowledge as a nurse would shield her actions from scrutiny, now faces the reality that her deception has been undone. Not by forensic evidence, not by scientific analysis, but by a child's observations and a detective's moral conscience. Willow's arrest becomes inevitable. The authorities, now armed with witness testimony and Chase's professional analysis of the situation, move quickly to apprehend her. The woman who walked free from the courthouse mere days before now finds herself facing far more serious charges. She attempted to poison her husband, an act that resulted in catastrophic medical consequences and attempted homicide. The evidence is circumstantial but powerful. A child's observation, a detective's testimony, the medical evidence of poison in Drew's system. The moral landscape of Port Charles. This storyline, as it has unfolded in January 2026, raises profound questions about the nature of justice, loyalty, and moral responsibility. Willow's journey from woman protecting herself from an oppressive husband to calculated murderer represents a tragic descent into darkness. What began as arguably understandable self-defense has evolved into something far more troubling, a willingness to eliminate problems through extreme violence, to maintain control through poison and manipulation, and to prioritize personal advantage over human life. The response of characters like Chase represents something equally important, the recognition that love and loyalty have limits, that they cannot extend to cover crimes, that true moral integrity sometimes demands that we expose and oppose the people we care about most deeply. Chase's willingness to do this despite the personal cost represents a form of moral courage that elevates him in the eyes of viewers and underscores the complexity of Port Charles's moral universe. Conclusion: when love becomes insufficient. General Hospital has always excelled at exploring the murky territory between right and wrong, between understandable human motivation and inexcusable criminal behavior. Willow's story exemplifies this exploration. She is not a cartoon villain motivated by pure evil. She is a complicated woman who made understandable defensive choices early in her relationship with Drew, but then allowed those choices to calcify into something darker and more dangerous. Her arrest represents not the final chapter of her story, but merely another painful turn in an increasingly tragic narrative. Behind bars awaiting trial for attempted murder, Willow will have ample time to contemplate the choices that brought her to this moment. The woman who believed herself free of consequences now faces the full weight of them. And in Port Charles, where secrets rarely remain buried for long, where witness testimony and moral courage ultimately prevail over calculated deception, justice, imperfect as it may be, has reasserted itself. Wiley, the young child caught in the middle of all of this darkness, will grow up carrying the memory of what he witnessed. Chase, carrying the weight of betraying the woman he loves for the sake of truth, will continue his life with the knowledge that he did what was right, even when it was impossibly difficult. And Drew, trapped in a body that no longer obeys his commands, will eventually confront the woman responsible for his condition, or perhaps, and more tragically, will never know at all. The Port Charles of early 2026 is a place where light and darkness contest for supremacy, where love proves insufficient against the demands of truth, and where even detectives must sometimes sacrifice their hearts to preserve their souls.